Damn.
Let's go.
Has tons of time into the end zone.
But too much, I feel like too much of the football touched the ground.
I'm with you. I think it's going to be an incomplete pass.
You are listening to The Review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Review. It's the Online Sports Guys College Football Podcast featuring us, the Online Sports Guys. Well, at least 50% of us this week. Usually there's 4 of us here. This week you got me, you got Brother Wilkie. We're going to talk college football the week that was. In a week where there weren't a lot of marquee games, probably the biggest one of all is one that I'm sure in the Wilkerson household brought about a lot of jumping for joy, and that's Arkansas with a impressive 20-10 win over Texas A&M at Jerry.
Yeah. And the interesting part about that, Phil, is opening the season with a win over Rice, you get a win over Texas at home. You go to Jerry World, beat Texas A&M. That means you're 3-0 in the Southwest Conference, and you get to go to the Cotton Bowl. At least how it was in the old days. But I never expected 4-0. I expected improvement, but 4-0 is really impressive for the Razorbacks right now. Yes, I was. Though we were jumping for joy here in the Wilkerson household. This is we're all. Hurting for brother John Nelson because of what his alma mater is going through at Florida State. And as I've mentioned a few weeks, I've been going through that for about 10 years now since Bobby Petrino left Arkansas. And to have the kind of start like this is, frankly, is very therapeutic. And I was just impressed how Arkansas just jumped on Texas A&M from the start. Mm-hmm. And really never let up offensively throughout the game. Again, great game plan by Barry Odom, the defensive coordinator from Arkansas.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. They look great on defense.
And they've been consistent with that all year. Barry Odom just has a way of being ahead of the game, facing another team's offense. Now, Texas A&M has had some injury issues on the offensive side. This is the year that the Aggies were supposed to challenge in the West, and it's just not happening. And
I think they might have been just a smidge overrated, but that could be wrong.
I don't know if they were a smidge overrated. I think the injury issues have been the reason why, and the depth just hasn't been there. But I was very impressed with the way Arkansas played, and I'm feeling really good about what they have for next week. But they are hitting the teeth of their schedule now, and this is where the rubber really meets the road for the next 4 weeks.
I mean, they jumped into the top 10. They had players flying all over the ball. Texas A&M just could not get anything going on offense the entire game outside of a fairly long run by Isaiah Spiller. Really, they held A&M to a field goal, and that's impressive. KJ Jefferson got dinged up a little bit in the second half of the game.
Yeah, he's got a bruised knee.
Yeah,
and he got a bruised knee out of it, and he feels that he'll be 100% when they get to Athens next week. And then Traylon Burks tweaked something. They haven't revealed it yet, and in the post-game presser, Burks was like, it's just a minor thing. But hopefully those are healed up, because obviously I think KJ Jefferson's fine, but Traylon Burks is the X factor for Arkansas. Although you got to love that running back stable that Arkansas has developed with Kendall Briles, and but defensively, I mean, that group just keeps gaining confidence every day. When you got a leader like Grant Morgan, a 6th-year senior, that has just been through, let's be honest, Phil, he's been through hell in those years at Arkansas. and he's being granted with this type of year, team-wise and individual-wise. You got to root for people like that.
Yeah, and I can't say enough things about how impressed I am with Jefferson's performance behind center. The kid is a sophomore, and he has fantastic touch on the ball. He's still learning a little bit in the passing game, but he was in complete control throughout that game, and it showed with the way that they executed their game plan almost immaculately.
And he's credited Felipe Franks, who was Arkansas's quarterback last year, for his maturity, because Franks took him under his wing, kind of showed him the ropes, and those two are very tight now. And you can see where peer to peer, where KJ Jefferson, his game has improved. I mean, he's a load at 255 to bring down, which, you know, that's what today's quarterbacks are like now. They're built like tight ends. And he's become a very pleasant surprise. And all I can say is go Hogs.
Yeah, next week, Arkansas travels to Athens between the hedges to play the University of Georgia, and what's probably going to be another marquee game for the week, and something we'll get into in the second half of the show when we preview the upcoming week. Another interesting game in the SEC this week, a game that had a little bit of a controversial finish, and that was Auburn versus Georgia State, a game that the Panthers led almost the entire game before Auburn took the ball 98 yards with just under 3 minutes to go in the game, scoring a touchdown late and then getting bonus pick 6 right before the buzzer. But there was a controversial play right before Auburn scored that touchdown to take the lead. A play that Georgia State head coach Sean Elliott and quite a few other people said might be a bit of SEC officiating home cooking, because it looked like it was an incomplete pass. The replay showed the ball hitting the ground.
Part of that football does touch the ground. Initially, that's incomplete.
Yet it was called complete, and Auburn scored on the next play. How monumental would that have been had Georgia State beaten Auburn?
Well, I mean, it's pretty monumental because you've got some of the I hesitate to say dysfunctional fans, but maybe unrealistic fans in the SEC. And I don't want to say unrealistic. I mean, they're let's say passionate fans of Auburn. But you know, it happened to Arkansas against Auburn last year, where you had the downing of the ball, but it was a backwards lateral by Bo Nix last year, and they still called it an incomplete pass, and that was at Auburn. And it stymied a chance for Arkansas to maybe steal a win between the hedges. You know, to be honest with you, Auburn, to me, just looked flat after Penn State. That was a huge game. You saw this being a trap to begin with, and it turned out to be that way. But you know, credit Brian Hardison and his staff for keeping the kids in the game. They didn't fold. Hey, they got a lucky break, and it just didn't go Georgia State's way. You know, I guess credit Georgia State, because here's another Sun Belt team that's giving the big boys fits. And you know, I've been kind of on the Sun Belt this year, but not backing up what they did last year. You know, obviously Coastal Carolina is having the season they're having, but they haven't really backed up the accomplishments they had last year this year. But this was another feather in the hat for the Sun Belt, and making the Auburn fans change their underwear after the game, after what the Panthers were doing.
It's a good way to put it. In other SEC action, both Georgia and Alabama had games. Georgia playing Vanderbilt and laid a 35 spot on them in the first quarter on the way to a 62-0 win, holding Vanderbilt to 77 total yards of offense for the game. Alabama with another 60 spot up against Southern Mississippi. It sure looks like at this point in time that you're talking about right there between Alabama and Georgia, the two best teams in college football, at least 4 weeks.
No doubt. But, you know, I think if you're going by the eye test, obviously those two are the best. But, you know, I've going strictly eye test here, Arkansas doesn't look like they're too far behind. And I'm not just speaking from the heart here. They've put together wins over Texas A&M. And so they're doing all the right things that the Razorbacks are to garner that kind of that A+ grade on the eye test. But again, as I said, they're hitting the teeth of their schedule now as Arkansas gets ready to not only get ready to play Georgia, but let's see as I call up the schedule here. But then you go to Ole Miss. We know how good Ole Miss is, and then you host Auburn. So that's their next 3 games: 2 road tests at Athens and at Oxford, and then hosting Auburn. So this is the time where we're going to find out how good Arkansas is. And even if they go 2-1 in that stretch, that's amazing accomplishment. And couple that with maybe a 3-point loss to Georgia, which I hope it doesn't happen, but I'm just bringing that as an example. That shouldn't do much as far as bringing down the ranking. So I know we might get some action on Twitter after what I just said, that Arkansas could probably hang on the eye test with Alabama, Georgia, and bring it at OSG Sports. But again, we're talking eye test here, and let's see what happens on the field.
One last SEC game I want to mention: the Florida Gators, who could be a potential spoiler as they've got their traditional end of October, beginning of November matchup with the Georgia Bulldogs. Florida struggled a little bit early against Tennessee, but pulled away in the second half. Emory Jones had a huge game at quarterback for the Gators.
Yeah, he's
2 touchdowns and ran for 144. He took control of that game.
Yeah, he's getting more and more comfortable with that offense. And I remember when this game was appointment television. Boy, has that rivalry slipped. LSU and Mississippi State yesterday, that was really a test for Ed Orgeron and the LSU Tigers. The natives are getting restless in the Bayou with the Tigers. And if that was a loss for LSU, God knows what would have happened. This was a fun SEC game. I expected a little more scoring out of this, but LSU secondary I thought played fantastic, and LSU gets the win at Starkville, and so they're going to rest comfortably a little better in Baton Rouge with that win. But coming up for the Tigers, for the LSU Tigers, they host Auburn, then go to Lexington, Kentucky to play the Wildcats on October 9th, which I think is a game we need to scrutinize because if that's a loss for LSU, they don't take kindly losing to the Wildcats, and then obviously hosting Florida, and then at Ole Miss and Alabama. I mean, this is the Ed Orgeron needs to win the games he can win, especially at home. But that Kentucky game looms large because I think that's going to be a measuring stick as to where this program is when they get into the teeth of their schedule with Florida the week after.
Before we move over to the ACC, I want to do the brief gratuitous promotion here. As we told you at the beginning, you are listening to the review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network. You can find us individually, me at OSG Phil, Brother John, who is not here today due to a previous commitment. He's at OSG Nelson. OSG J-Dub is recovering from some dental work. Long story, don't ask. And Brother Wilkie here, you can reach at OSG Sports, Facebook and Twitter at OSG Sports. We've got a phone app. Go to the Google Play Store, the Apple Store, download it. It is free, and it gives you access to all of our programming, including our college football content, our soccer content, and any other sport that you could think of. Download the OSG Sports app today. Wilkie, I'm going to qualify this before I'm going to lead this part off here by saying in a minute we're going to hear a taped segment from Brother John talking about his alma mater who plays in the SEC or the ACC.
ACC.
Yes, ACC. I kind of got my letters jumbled.
That would be the Atlantic Coast Conference.
Yes. Some uproar in the Atlantic Coast Conference this week as the big dog for the last several years, the Clemson Tigers, who have struggled in 2021, struggled even more this week, and they go down to North Carolina State, 27-21 in overtime. Did it surprise you that the Wolfpack won that game? And we talked last week about the problems at Clemson. Does this make it a big, fat, festering wound?
Well, I'm going to say yes to both. I was a little surprised NC State won. Look, Dave Doran has been there for 9 years, and finally gets a signature win. NC State's always been that underachieving program, in my opinion, and they finally got it done against Clemson. And I said last week, it's hard for me to put a finger on what's the issue with Clemson on offense. And then I was watching the game. There's no home run hitter in the backfield anymore. And even Will Shipley, who was the guy they are counting on to be that guy, he was injured late in the fourth quarter, and he was only held to 36 yards rushing. DJ Ugalele finally showed some of his legs running out of the pocket, which we've been wondering why he hasn't done that. The other thing is, Justin Ross was the go-to receiver, and he's had a hard time getting open and making those chunk plays. So you don't have the elite quarterback there anymore. You don't have the Trevor Lawrence or Deshaun Watson. What you got to me is a Woodrow Danzler clone, Homer Jordan. DJU is turning into a nice quarterback, but he's just not the elite quarterback right now. He may develop into that, but right now, he just doesn't have the horses that Trevor Lawrence had. And so that's why Clemson's offense is struggling, and they're really relying so much on that defense, which is still elite. But I was really impressed with Devin Leary, the quarterback for North Carolina State.
Yes, yeah, great.
Four touchdowns. Emeka Amizi is turning into that big-time receiver they expected. And then Ricky Person has been the workhorse for them, for the Pack in the backfield. And when they needed Ricky Person and Zonovan Knight, they came through. I was really happy for NC State. This is a signature win that they can build on, that they've been wanting since Dave Doran took the job, and it finally happened. And they're probably, between NC State and Wake Forest, the teams to beat in the Atlantic.
Yeah, I was going to go there next. We talked a couple of weeks ago when we kind of led up to Brother John's rant about his alma mater of Florida State and how they should not have been basically waxed by Wake Forest. But lo and behold, Wake Forest is a pretty damn good football team.
Well, I never discounted Dave Clawson team. I mean, he gets the most out of his talent. He has a system, and he gets the players for that system. And they always play well, always play hard, and always win 3 or 4 games you don't expect them to win. And they're tough physically. And this is exactly what you're seeing this year with the Demon Deacons this year. What I like about them is they spread the offense around. There's no one great individual player, but when you look at the stats and when you watch the game, everybody's contributing on the offensive end. And then the defense, again, they're tough, they're physical, and they make the third down stops when they need to. So yeah, I'm very impressed with Wake Forest. I didn't expect a 4-0 start, but I'll take it.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, Sam Hartman's done wonders at quarterback. The biggest thing I think that stands out about Wake Forest to me is the fact that they had almost the entire starting lineup returned from last year,
which helps.
Yeah, in college football, that makes a huge difference to have that kind of experience and bonding time where you've gotten to play together before. And it shows. We could be talking about a team that has a shot or at least a path to the ACC title.
Right. But the last 4 games of the regular season for Wake is, if they go 4-0, yeah, they deserve a trip to Charlotte, because first on November 6th, they got Louisville, Syracuse, Army, and Army is going to be a tough one. That game is at
They
West
always
Point
are.
and Duke. If you can go, if you can beat Louisville, Syracuse, and Duke, yeah, you're still in the race. Army, okay, it's if they lose that game, it doesn't affect them in the conference. But then your last 4 games, you close at North Carolina, you host NC State, and then you close at Clemson and at Boston College. So that's going to be a tough road to hoe for Wake. If they can stay injury free, if they can keep getting the breaks, if Sam Hartman can continue to spread the wealth, I give them a puncher's chance. But that, as the way the season is shaping up, the way BC is playing, the way NC State, if they get a nice little boost. Carolina's a winnable game, because we'll discuss Carolina, what they did yesterday a little later. There's a puncher's chance for Wake to go to the first title game since the Jim Grobe miracle in 2006.
Indeed, and you mentioned the North Carolina game. The Tar Heels made the trip down to Atlanta to square off with Georgia Tech at the Mercedes-Benz Dome here in downtown Atlanta. And to put it mildly, Georgia Tech laid the smackdown on them, 45-22. The Yellow Jackets outscoring North Carolina 32-15 in the second half alone. Jeff Sims came back from injury and losing his starting job and had a tremendous game. 150 yards running, 120 something yards passing. Looked like a completely different quarterback than he did in the first game of the season when the Yellow Jackets lost to Northern Illinois. And I don't know if this game speaks so much to Georgia Tech as much as it speaks to North Carolina not being what anybody really thought that they would be.
Well, I think it speaks to both. This is a win that Georgia Tech desperately needed. This is the signature win you build on for the Jeff Collins era. And what I kept thinking as I was watching Jeff Sims, he's definitely a leader of that team, a leader of that offense, and he makes that offense go. And so they've got a guy that they can depend on offensively. They're not too one-dimensional, like during the Paul Johnson era. As for North Carolina, Sam Howell does not have anybody in the backfield he's comfortable with. They're one-dimensional. They're a passing team, and what defensive coordinators are finding out is they're rushing 8 because that offensive line has not been very good for Carolina. Sam Howell's basically running for his life, and he has no time to set and throw. And so, plus the issues that they're having on defense as well, it's shaping up to be a long year for the Tar Heels. And Mac Brown even said that they're struggling right now as a football team. This basically ends any kind of Heisman hope for Sam Howell.
Oh, yeah.
With the start they're having, and he's still a talented quarterback. He still threw for 2 touchdowns, and he was 25 of 39. So you would take those kind of numbers if you could, but when you get sacked 8 times, what does that tell you? That offensive line has got to improve, but they got to find a guy in the backfield that can relieve some of this pressure and call off the dogs. Because if you're a DC in the ACC, you're sending 7, 8 guys,
and walking around with a huge grin on your face.
Exactly, and you've got corners that right now are able to. If your corners can do well one-on-one, which they can when you got a quarterback running for your life, that just doesn't bode well for the Tar Heels, and it's turning into a hugely disappointing year in Chapel Hill.
Moving on in the ACC, this is the part where we toss to Brother John, who's going to talk about his Florida State Seminoles, who lost to Louisville this week and have really had some issues this season.
Now, do we need to have a disclaimer on this?
Yes, that's what I was going to disclaim here. We don't all necessarily agree with Brother John's opinions, but as the aggrieved alumnus, he is certainly entitled to them. I still think that Mike Norvell is going to end up being an okay coach for the Seminoles myself. It's just going to take a while. That rebuilding project was a lot more extensive than I think that some of the alumni there realize. And churning through coaches every year and a half really doesn't solve any problems. John, let's take it away here.
All right. Sorry I can't be there this week, but obviously, once again, we are raising the specter, not the spectacle, but it could be a spectacle, but the specter and the spectacle, I guess, of Florida State University. And the question of when is enough enough? The athletic director this week basically gave Mike Norvell the dreaded vote of confidence going into the game against Louisville, saying that Norvell is our coach. We will win. We will get better. So the question for me is now multifold. It has started with Mike Norvell, who I think has now far exceeded his welcome. And we are now getting into the territory of Daryl Mudra. And this is the history lesson for the day. So 1974-75, Daryl Mudra was the head coach for 2 seasons at Florida State University. He went 0-8 in 1974, won his 9th game, and it was against Miami, if I'm not mistaken. Then finished the season 1-10, was given a second year, didn't last through the year 2 of 1975. And then that was when someone came in who stayed there for a while. So the question remains, when is enough enough? And now I'm to the point to where I'm not just saying this about a head coach and a staff. I'm also saying this about an athletic director who seemingly is more than happy to just sit there and be quaint with the status quo. And if it has to do with a $3.75 million contract, I'm sure that there are folks who will be more than happy at this point to cut a check. And it is from a Florida State University perspective. And once again, I'm the alum on the show, so this is where I'm coming at from this. It's completely unacceptable where by the end of this Mike Norvell administration and whomever is brought in to succeed, that Florida State University will have been irrelevant in the college football picture for a decade if the next individual is given the patience to purge the program of the prospects and the underclassmen that were brought in under Mike Norvell and possibly, freshmen under Willie Taggart, who are now getting toward the end of their run as well. So I would think that for any fan that is in a situation like this, it's unacceptable to be irrelevant for a decade when the situation can be changed. And when you have an individual who quits, an individual who is responded to in Odell Higgins, then you have bad hire in Willie Taggart, then you have bad hire in Mike Norvell, and this is where you are. So right now, you're at that halfway point. You're at 5 years of irrelevancy as it is. Bring in an individual at the end of this season. That's year 6. If you're patient, you let them purge through a cycle, bring in everybody through 4 years. That's 10 years. And I think that that's what we're looking at here in the ACC. So as we are recording this across the board on your Sunday, I just wonder what the future is for both Mike Norvell and an athletic director at Florida State University. Speaking of the ACC, with the loss of Clemson to North Carolina State in double overtime, I don't see an ACC team being a part of the Final Four. I honestly don't. I think it's going to be Georgia and Alabama. They will play each other in the SEC championship game, and they'll probably end up playing each other again for the BCS championship. Oregon probably is your number 3, and then it's a fight for number 4. Is it probably going to be someone out of the Big 10, 12, 14? Probably. Might be Ohio State or whoever the survivor is out of that conference. But right now, Oklahoma, unimpressive in their home win at the last against West Virginia. So I think that the Big 12 is out of the discussion. And this year, this is the year where the Pac-12 14 comes in and they're number 3, and then whoever fights in for number 4. And you look at just the relative amount of chaos, USC losing to start their weekend off as best as possible. And I know that folks want to attribute this loss to Clay Helton, but you can't do that since you have an interim. And that is the larger questions for me as we come out of this weekend is the ACC being out of the discussion. And I know that Wilkie, you and Phil will discuss what's wrong or what could be wrong with what's going on at Clemson right now. And then everything else working its way through. The SEC is coming through as status quo. And I know that, Wilkie, you're really trying to find on the secondary market dogs and hogs tickets for noon. I know, noon on a Saturday. I know it's going to be kind of tough. But it's definitely going to be worth it. So those are the issues that I have. Continuing issues in the ACC, SEC being status quo, and who's number 4. So that's how it is for me this week. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
He's got a track record. It's a very good track record. Now they're ranked 4th nationally in recruiting. And if that recruiting class holds, there's hope. And I think one of the big reasons why Florida State is kind of not ignoring what the fans say is because the recruiting classes are there. If there were a bunch of decommits, I can see that.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, the coaching staff and Norvell himself are getting these type of players to verbally commit to Florida State. And look, I think kids today are, again, a lot more smarter than back in the day. They know more. But when they walk into Tallahassee, they see all the national championships that have been won. Again, a strong NFL alumni. And that's the thing. These kids want to go to the NFL. And Florida State produces NFL talent and always has. And those guys hang around in Tallahassee. And I haven't really seen any of the alums come out against Mike Norvell, which tells me that
There's
some support there. Exactly. And this is just one of those years. It's year 2. Players are coming and going more. So it's just one of those years in Florida State. Just, let it go. Let's get the year over with because I think the future is a lot brighter. Again, that spear on the helmet still resonates with the 5 stars and the 4 stars. And again, I think Mike Norvell is a good coach.
And the one point I did agree with what John said here in his rant about the ACC is I believe that their hopes for a college football playoff berth may have gone the way of the wind after Clemson took that loss at NC State. I just don't see anybody else in that conference that's going to be strong enough to make it to that final so-called college football Final Four.
Yeah, I don't think BC or Wake is going to be undefeated when we get to that point. And, the ACC has probably seen their chances. But this is where the ACC has got to realize, which they did about 15 years ago, more 15 years ago, that the profile for football has got to be upgraded. And, it doesn't help that Florida State's having the kind of year they are, because if Florida State was undefeated, they'd be on national TV all the time. And that Florida State Clemson rivalry would still resonate as.
Same with Miami.
Same with Miami. I think Miami is probably in a much worse position than Florida State right now. And, Manny Diaz might be asked to leave if he keeps it up.
Yeah.
Because there's a guy in
pepper hot there.
Exactly, because there's a guy in Eugene, Oregon that's from the area and played there that is making some noise in the Pac-12, and they would like to see him come back and bring the Canes back to national championship contention. It's very similar to what Mark Richt was going through toward the end of his Georgia era, and there was a certain alumni that was being courted by other schools, and the alums decided to take matters into their own hands. But that's a story for another day. But the ACC has got to step up their football profile. I mean, that was one of the stipulations when they decided to go into partnership with ESPN start their network, is that had to be upgraded, and they did that. And ever since that's happened, Clemson has just really kind of cast a shadow on a lot of things that are not well with ACC football. So, yeah, I agree. There can't be any playoff this year for the ACC.
I think that's a good spot for us to jump off here and end and wrap up the first half of the show. When we come back into the second half of the show, Wilkie, we want to talk a little bit about the Big Ten and the Big 12. Some strange games there. That and a few other odds and ends from week number 4, and a little bit of a look ahead to week number 5. All that and more when we come back to the second half of the review. You are listening to the review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
The OSG app is up and running on your Android or iPhone. Install the OSG app and listen to our podcast from college football, soccer, and lacrosse. What are you waiting for? Download the OSG app today.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency, or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinski of Apolinski and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
The chant is, "We want Caleb," as in Caleb Williams, the backup quarterback. True freshman.
Thanks for sticking around, everybody. You have made it to the second half of the show. This is the review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network. We are your hosts, the Online Sports Guys. Unfortunately, it's only 2 out of the 4 of us today, Brother Wilkie and myself, Brother Phil. Hopefully next week we'll have a full house with OSG J-Dub and OSG Nelson back in the fold. But in the meantime, Wilkie and I will continue our discussion about the week that was in college football, and coming up a little later in the block, we'll talk about the week ahead. Wilkie, we hit the SEC and the ACC in the first half of the show. Second half here, we want to talk a little bit about some Big Ten college football, because a couple of, well, I shouldn't say a couple of the big name schools there, but the team that was kind of the so-called highest ranked team in the Big Ten, the Iowa Hawkeyes, really struggled with a very undermanned Colorado State team. Iowa got the win 24-14, but did not look very impressive in doing it.
Well, I mean, these type of games are going to happen. Look, Colorado State, yeah, they may have been, as you say, a little undermanned, but they're coached by Steve Adazio, who has a way of bringing out the toughness in his teams. Look, his BC teams were probably some of the toughest football teams I've ever seen. And they managed to win close games and keep better offenses, keep their yardage and scoring down. And he's obviously built that same, doing the same thing at Colorado State. But you know, I think it was a decent win for Iowa, because this is the end of non-conference play for the Hawkeyes. They faced a tough physical football team, which they're going to have to face when they go to Madison, Wisconsin in October, and when they play Penn State on October 9th. I mean, they're going to face that kind of physicality on defense. And so this was a good test for the Hawkeyes, because they're a physical team themselves. I'm really impressed with that offensive line. But I'm still very high on Iowa. I really like them in the Big Ten. The way Ohio State has shown defensively, and I'm not saying they're the best team in the Big Ten, but they're on a very short list of great teams in the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, they might be. The other top 10 team in the Big Ten, the Penn State Nittany Lions, an easy win over Villanova, 38-17. Sean Clifford, 19 for 26, 401, 4 touchdowns. Not going to really get into much detail there. Same with Ohio State. Even without their starting quarterback, C.J. Stroud, the Buckeyes rolled over a very, very bad Akron football team, 59-7.
How bad?
Bottom of the
All I
barrel.
get is a laugh.
Definitely bottom of the barrel bad, the Zips. Wisconsin, you mentioned them just a couple seconds ago. The Badgers did not have the best of days against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, giving up 31 points in the fourth quarter and losing to the Irish 41-13.
Yeah, Graham Mertz, he struggled a little bit in that game offensively, and Notre Dame had a really good game plan against that ground and pound Wisconsin offense. Paul Chryst admitted that they've got to put their quarterback Mertz in a better position than what he was put into against Notre Dame. Of course, Notre Dame lost Jack Crone for the game, and backup comes in and performs nicely for Notre Dame, which, I was really impressed with Notre Dame. We've been on them because they haven't looked all that impressive. Well, they looked impressive against Florida State, but then Florida State came back on them. But Notre Dame is definitely getting better. And obviously they've got a big game coming up this Saturday, which we'll talk about a little later.
Yes.
Wisconsin fans, just thank God it was a non-conference game. That's all I can say.
Yeah, you're 1-2 now overall on the season. The other games of note in the Big Ten feature the two Michigan schools. The Michigan Wolverines with a 20-13 win over a very feisty Rutgers team, and Michigan State pulls out the win in overtime on a field goal. They beat Nebraska 23-20 in what was a lot closer game than a lot of people expected.
Yeah, but I gotta credit Nebraska on that. The pride that they're showing right now. I mean, come on. We're going to talk about Oklahoma a little later, but the fact that they had the type of game against Oklahoma in Norman, and then they go to East Lansing, and look, Michigan State to me is the pleasant surprise of college football this year, and Mel Tucker along with Sam Pittman are probably the in a horse race for the Coach of the Year honor. But Kenny Walker continues to impress in that backfield. He didn't get 100 yards, but when they need a little bit of a chunk play, or if they need to move the sticks, he was there. Peyton Thorne didn't have the best game, but he's a serviceable quarterback, a paint by numbers quarterback, and he was able to complete passes when he needed to. I'll credit Nebraska's defense. They played very well in this game. And Adrian Martinez, again, continues to put up nice numbers. Time just ran out. Michigan State was just that much better. But I still like the Spartans. I think they are a team you don't want to mess with. I love the way Mel Tucker has built this program quickly. They had several transfers this year. I'm going to say the number was in the 40s. And so he got an infusion of talent thanks to the way college football is now, with the extra year eligibility because of COVID and the transfer portal. And he's used that to his advantage. And Michigan State is undefeated and looking really good right now.
We move over to the Big 12, where the big dog in the Big 12, the Oklahoma Sooners, got the win this week, 16-13 over a very gamey West Virginia team. But they did not. The Sooners have looked shaky all season long. The high-powered offense hasn't really been there this year for them. And I don't know if it's Spencer Rattler going through the sophomore slump. I don't know if he just doesn't have the guys around him to make plays. but he hasn't looked like the same guy even as he did at the end of last season. He hasn't looked sharp, and the Sooners have really struggled even though they're undefeated.
Well, offensively this year, they just don't have, when you think of Nebraska, you think of Oklahoma, you think of having somebody that's a home run hitter in the backfield, and they just don't have that this year. And so they're asking a lot from Spencer Rattler in his sophomore year. And who's their go-to receiver right now? That's been in question for OU. Mike Woods, the Arkansas transfer, had a great game, 86 yards, but he never made a trip into the end zone. Spencer Rattler threw one touchdown pass in the entire game, and who they're really depending on is their kicker. And again, this is where the special teams comes into play. And Gabe Burkick has been huge. He's been an MVP for Oklahoma this year. He's kept them in the games. But I also got to tip my hat to West Virginia. I thought defensively that team has improved greatly. Had Spencer Rattler kind of running for his life a little bit. Oklahoma has got issues defensively, and Alex Grinch is, I mean, I'm sure it's a constant headache for him as to why things haven't gone well defensively. So yeah, you're right. Oklahoma's struggling a little bit on the offensive end, and let's see who the Sooners have coming up. Well, they're going up against on October 2nd a Kansas State team that is kind of mediocre right now, and then you got the Red River Shootout against Texas, and Texas had a good time against Texas Tech. Let's call it that way. So really, I mean, when you look at their schedule and how the Big 12 is kind of down this year, you would think, because Iowa State is struggling a little bit. They haven't put together the wins. Baylor is a surprise.
Nice win for Dave Aranda's crew over Iowa State this week.
Exactly. So it's hard to really gauge where Oklahoma is going to be when it's all said and done. I think the Oklahoma State game, the Bedlam game on November 7th, I should say, is going to be huge. Well, it always is. But that's going to be a game that's going to determine a lot of things for OU.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the game as in Bedlam that may end up being a game for Big 12 conference supremacy there. Oklahoma.
Well, what could be interesting is it could be that they meet in Stillwater on the 27th, and the next week they meet again in the title game.
Yeah, it's certainly looking like
Bedlam too.
looking like a possibility here, the way things are going right now. Yeah, you mentioned Texas. They dropped a 70 spot on Texas Tech. And a brief mention, even though J-Dub isn't here to defend them, his mighty Kansas Jayhawks traveled to Duke and went down in flames again. Duke beats them 52-33.
I know Texas Tech is, let's call a horse a horse, they're awful. But hasn't it been interesting that ever since that Arkansas loss by Texas, they have just poured it on offensively. And I think the move to Casey Thompson as quarterback has paid dividends for Sark.
He has. No question.
He has felt comfortable in that offense. He's multi-dynamic. And then Bijan Robinson has he had 137 yards rushing against the Red Raiders, who are, what did I say they are? Not very good. So it's interesting how Texas has put on since that Arkansas loss.
And then real quick in the Pac-12, everybody pretty much holds serve there. The only game that surprised me a little bit was USC just got absolutely, shall we say, slaughtered by a much improved Oregon State team.
I'll tell you, Jonathan Harris, the head coach there at Oregon State, has, he was a legendary quarterback there, and he's brought his offensive system to Corvallis, and he's gotten some players now. And Oregon State's going to be a factor in the next few years. Isn't it interesting that Oregon and Oregon State are the teams probably with the bullets right now in the Pac-12? The other thing is Washington finally showed they had an offense. They whooped on Arkansas State last week, and they took on a pretty good Cal team in Seattle and put up 31 points and handled them well. There's really no big surprises to me in the Big 12. You're right. Everybody kind of held serve. Oregon put it to Arizona, and Arizona's going through their growing pains right now. UCLA got a win over Stanford. Maybe that rights the ship for Chip Kelly's crew. But you would think that Oregon right now is the flag carrier for the Pac-12, and if they're going to make the playoff, Oregon is the team to do it.
And real quick before we move on to next week, look ahead. Got to mention the battle of my household, Georgia Southern versus Louisiana. A game that both the missus and I watched at least for a little while until we had to go someplace.
Hey, wait a minute. I'm on your side. I'm on Eagle Nation now.
You are. However, we came up just a bit short.
Yes, we did.
Good game though. Louisiana, one of the leaders in the Sun Belt Conference, and Southern struggling a little bit, but they looked really good on defense and gave them a game. Louisiana pulled out the win 28-20. That might have been her in the background.
I'm willing to bet it was. And it was our mistake that junior correspondent Michael Wilkerson, who's a freshman at Georgia Southern and who lives right next to Paulson Stadium, and it was in the building, didn't give us a report. So we're going to work on that next time, especially when BYU comes to town and Coastal.
You have your mission. It's time to look ahead as we kind of move on here through the show and wind things down for week number 4 in the great big wide wonderful world of college football. We talked about it a little bit at the beginning of the show, and your marquee game may be the first game of the day on Saturday, and that's when Arkansas comes to Athens and meets up with Georgia between the hedges in what promises to be a raucous sold-out Sanford Stadium. And a game you might attend if you're lucky enough to score some tickets.
I'm openly lobbying for tickets, and so anybody who's not using their tickets for Arkansas and Georgia, you have a willing purchaser.
Some interesting matchups in this game. I'm really looking forward to seeing how Georgia handles their first real challenge since week 1 against Clemson. And I'm also curious to see how Arkansas fares after 2 really tough games back to back.
Yeah, and again, I mentioned they're at the teeth of their schedule, but if both their both their defensive coordinators are in peak condition, if Barry Odom has got his unit flying around the ball, and if Dan Lanning has the Bulldogs doing the same thing, both defensive primed for this game, I think you're looking at a 9-6 type of 12-9 type of game, because both offenses are good. I mean, they've got weapons all over the place, but those defenses, Georgia's is elite. Arkansas is probably almost there, and I think that's what I'm going to be watching throughout the game, is how those defenses are going up against that dynamic offense. So the pressure is really on Kendall Briles and Georgia's offensive coordinator. Names escapes me right now.
You're talking about Todd Monken.
Todd Monken, yes.
And the Bulldogs have looked like over the last 2 weeks have really started putting things together on offense too. JT Daniels only played in 1 quarter versus Vanderbilt. Missed 1 pass, threw for 2 touchdowns, handed off for a couple more. But the guy from Georgia who seems to have changed that lineup is freshman tight end Brock Bowers, who has caught a couple touchdown passes and ran for 1 against Vanderbilt. He's been a game breaker for them.
Right. Well, I think it's going to be a classic ball game. I just love the sum of the parts with both teams. 2 really good offenses, but elite defenses with 2 outstanding defensive coordinators. If you like pure football, if you're like me and you're watching all the moving parts going on, you're gonna love this game.
And the other
Let's go Hogs.
big SEC matchup is the really, really dangerous Ole Miss Rebels venture to Alabama and take on the Crimson Tide in Tuscaloosa. Lane Kiffin has Matt Corral performing at a level not seen too much around the country so far this season. He's been fantastic at quarterback. And this is a dangerous game for the Tide. If they are not on their toes defensively, Ole Miss could put some points up in a hurry.
Yeah, Matt Corral is probably the best quarterback at Ole Miss since Archie Manning, way back when. And he's, you look at the Heisman odds, and right now he's the guy that everybody's looking at. Ole Miss, it doesn't matter who the coach is. Ole Miss always plays Alabama well. Don't know why that is, but you really think that Lane Kiffin has a chance to break the Nick Saban streak over his assistants, don't you? You kind of have that feeling because what we saw from Alabama last week was a team where you can stop that run game. There's no Najee Harris back there that can run over you and run by you, and you can read the letters on his back as he does so. You got a freshman quarterback that is had his first really SEC test in that game last week and performed well, but he's still a freshman. This is the time. If Ole Miss is going to get him, this would be it. And in a roundabout way, it might be a hard sell, but this is kind of like NC State and Clemson this past week in a way. It's just the opposite because Alabama's hosting. But you've got a team in the West that is up and coming with a dynamic head coach against the 8,000-pound gorilla of the SEC. So if a Saban former assistant is going to get him, this is the best chance they've had.
I don't think
Jimbo Fisher is going to do it.
I don't know what the over-under is on this game, but I'm pretty sure taking the over is probably the safe play. And the other marquee matchup, there are three huge games this week. The third marquee matchup is one that I'm also very intrigued by, and that's Cincinnati traveling to Notre Dame to take on the Irish. A chance for the big boys of the group of five to make a big statement here if Cincinnati can pull this off.
And if Cincinnati does pull this off, I think it's going to be very, very hard to not include them in the playoffs, unless they stub their toe against an American team. But they've done everything they can do. They've got some. Luke Fickell can develop talent, and that's his strength. And this is their Super Bowl. And they're going to be up for this game, emotionally up for this game. Notre Dame needs to buckle their chin straps and get ready because, and you lived in Cincinnati for a while. You lived in that part. They're trying to find their identity within Ohio with Ohio State. And I think if they beat Notre Dame, and let's say they beat them impressively, let's say they beat them by 2 or 3 touchdowns in South Bend, don't you think that in a way that'll help their profile in their own state in Northern Kentucky?
Oh, God, yes. There are a zillion Notre Dame fans in that part of the world, never mind the national footprint. To make a statement and beat the Irish in Notre Dame, even if they weren't ranked in the top 10, would be a huge accomplishment. But to do it when they are ranked in the top 10 would be arguably it could be a game changer for a program that's been knocking at the door of the Power Five, wanting to get a seat at the table. And this may be what does it for them if they can pull off this win. I don't know if they're able to do it. Notre Dame hasn't been overly impressive this year until the fourth quarter of this past week's game versus Wisconsin.
Right.
So there is a chance.
But I'm thinking more in the state of Ohio. They're competing with Ohio State, But if they win, and like I say, if they do it in 2 or 3 touchdowns, I mean, I don't think they're going to knock off Ohio State in the front pages of the sports page. Probably not even Cincinnati. But at the same time,
they
it's going to
will
go a
this
long
week.
way.
If they win
Yeah,
this game, they will be the front page or
in
the
the
sports story.
Cincinnati Enquirer. All right, even over the Bengals.
Oh yeah, not even close. Any other games that jump off the grid for you here as we kind of wind things down in the show?
Oh, now you're putting the spot on me, brother Phil. Let's see. Let's roll down the list here.
I'm interested in
Uh,
Florida traveling to Kentucky. Kentucky's not going to be an easy out, and Florida's had a couple of back-to-back tough games, even though they ended up winning comfortably against Tennessee. This one signals a little bit of danger to me. The Wildcats are not going to be easy for the Gators.
2 games right off the bat: Baylor and Oklahoma State and Stillwater. Dave Aranda's club is much better than we anticipated. Oklahoma State. I think this is going to be one of the better games of the day. And this is for probably the 2 spot in the Big 12, especially the way Baylor's playing. So I think that's going to be a fun game to watch. Let's see the other one. There it is. Boston College at Clemson.
Yes.
Now, Jeff Heffley has kept the tough physicality that BC is known for, kept that going. And let's face it, we know Clemson's a little down this year. BC always plays Clemson well, always. And I think this is going to be a lot of pressure on Clemson to break it out offensively. I wouldn't want to be at practice this week at Clemson, South Carolina. BC's full of confidence. They're 4-0. They see that if they can get this win in Death Valley, they will be right there with Wake as the teams to beat in the Atlantic, and that would be 2 losses in the division by Clemson. So I think that's going to be a fun game to watch. It would not shock me at all if BC won that game.
Yeah, the natives are already starting to get a little bit restless in South Carolina just because they're having a little bit of a down season. The reverse of the big games, I want to mention this now because I just came across it as I was skimming down the schedule. Possibly the polar opposite of all these big games
Yeah.
is a matchup that I just saw, and now where did it go on the schedule? Oh, UConn at Vanderbilt.
I hope they're giving away tickets for that one.
A bottom of the barrel special right there with 2 of the 5 or possibly 5 worst teams in college football squaring off at Vanderbilt Stadium in Nashville. This has the potential of a 6-3 game with multiple turnovers.
We should go. It's just a 4.5-hour drive for us.
It is. It
we
is.
could probably get in for free.
Why
Hey,
would
you
we
came to watch the game? Come on in.
Here's $10. Come watch our game.
Exactly. Oh man, I'll do that for $10.
Pay the
Yeah,
gas. We're there.
Yeah, we appreciate you helping out with the gas money.
It's on ESPNU if you really want to watch.
Louisiana Tech and NC State. Is there a letdown for NC State after a big win over Clemson? That's what they're going to have to guard against because you've got a Conference USA team that can surprise you if they have to. But those are the games that intrigue me right now. Are the ones we mentioned.
All right. Sounds like we've got a pretty good week ahead of us. Oh, one last game, and just because I didn't scroll far enough up on the schedules. Here's a game that could have a lot of intrigue and a little bit of implications in the Big Ten. Number 5, Iowa travels to College Park, Maryland to play the undefeated Terrapins on a Friday night.
Yeah, I saw that, and my gut feeling is I just like Iowa in that game. I just love how physical and opportunistic that Hawkeye team is. I think they're much better offensively than they've let on last week against Colorado State. I just think Iowa is seasoned right now. And yeah, Maryland's playing well, but this is probably the biggest test for Maryland right now. But I like Iowa.
And with that, I think we'll bring a wrap to this week, bring it to a close. If you're out there listening and have made it all the way this far on the show, first of all, thank you. Second of all, what games are you looking forward to in week number 5? Anything that we haven't mentioned, let us know. Tweet at us at OSG Sports. You can hit me up on Twitter as well at OSGPhil. Wilkie, well, yeah, we won't mention Twitter there. Go check out our Facebook page at OSG Sports. Leave us a note there. We might be able to get a late mention of your games in. We'll leave Brother John's rant from the first half of the show alone and let it stand. If you want to circle back and listen to what he said, well, knock yourselves out. So, with all that being said, for Brother Wilkie, I am OSG Phil. We are 2 of the 4 online sports guys. Thanks for sticking around and listening to our college football show. You can catch us every week at roughly about the same time on a Monday on our YouTube channel at OSG Sports, Facebook page at OSG Sports, Twitter at OSG Sports. Our home base for our podcast is Stitcher. Just look us up there, like everything else at OSG Sports. For Brother Wilkie, I am Brother Phil. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great week, everybody. We will talk to you again next week. Bye-bye.